Hey all, today we're going to be going through some B voicings, but we're just quickly going to recap a little bit of what we did prior. So essentially what I'm teaching you how to do is identify chords and transpose them into different keys, which is essential if you're trying to learn how to do jazz comping. So here you can see we have D minor. So the key of D has F sharp and C sharp, which means that that's a flat third, so 1 flat 3 5. G, a G chord is G B D. So this is 5 3 1 because D is the fifth, G is the first, or sorry, 5 1 3 because D is the fifth, G is the foist, and then B is the third, right? And then here, in this example, I used the root position, but I knew that would sound bad, so I wound up using first inversion, and I showed you guys what that sounds like. So if you want to see stuff more in depth, please go to the previous episode. Today, we're going to be talking about B voicings. My A voicing should be around here somewhere. Okay, so here we have what we call A voicings. This is C through E, keys C through E. So when I transpose this, I transposed it into G. These voicings will sound okay, but it's just not a normal thing to use them, mostly because of where we comp on jazz piano happens near middle C. But there's nothing wrong with using this in the higher octaves or the higher registers. It wouldn't sound bad if you actually did it in the octave that it's written, but it's just not a kosher way to play a 2-5-1. Of course, we are learning these rules to eventually break them, but we'll get to that much later. So here, what I did was similar to our other 2-5-1. I analyzed the tones. Now, yes, this says D minor 7 or D minor minor 7. Yes, this says G7 or G major minor 7. But we impose voices on top of them, namely the 9, the 13. So you can do that with other chords too, and you can kind of make up your own impositions and just your own way of playing, but this is just a way to start out. But today, we are going to learn the B voicings. And they are used for keys F through a B. Okay? So, again, this isn't that hard. So first of all, we got to figure out what the heck. Well, let's start in F because it's a nice easy key. In college, we used to call it the Pippa's key, mostly because it's easy for all instruments, especially horns. And in jazz, we use instruments that are what we called keyed differently, meaning that they play their concert B flat is a different note, is called a different note for them. A conversation not worth getting into right now because this is going to be pretty complicated in and of itself. So here I've written out an F scale. Do this anytime you're analyzing or trying to figure stuff out. So our two chords, since we're doing a 2-5-1, these are always going to be 2-5-1 voicings. Our two chord, its triad is G, B flat, D, because G is the second tone, so that's 2. And then our 5 chord is C. I always forget to add the ninth. And then, so there's our C chord, moves in thirds, so that's our 5. And then our 1 chord is going to be F, A, C. Now those are just the triads. And for those who have watched our previous episode, you'll remember that we actually impose voicings. So we're going to write what we play when we see G minor 7 to C7 to F major 7. So academically, these chords are called G minor minor 7, C major, minor 7, F major, major 7. We went over that in the past video as to the academic nomenclature. So if you don't know that, what are you doing here? Go back to the other video. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write in the standard, voicings. I kind of missed that B flat. That's supposed to be B flat, folks. Sorry about that. And then you have E, A, B flats, D, and then you have E, G, A, C, I believe. Yep. Now this is just from memory, and really you should memorize the first key of each set of voicings. It's just going to make your life easier, because then you have an example you can follow. So we've already analyzed this in the key of F. So there's our macro, or what I call the macro analyzation. So now we're going to analyze the voicings. So here on G minor, let's see here. I have flat 7, 9, flat 3, 5. 7, 9, 3, 5. That sounds familiar. And then of course 7 is going to go to the third. So we got 3, was that 13, 7, 9. And then this is, oh right, I should mention that that's a flat 7. So that's in the key of C. Okay, so here we have 3, 13, flat 7, 9 in the key of C. And then F major 7, so in the key of F, this would be E. Aha, nice, I'm writing the letters instead of the numbers. This would be regular 7, 9, 3, 5, all unaltered. All right, so let's just quickly go back, and we're just going to use, let's do this one because it has the most voices in it. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Now, here again, we're just going to label 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we're going to have 9. That just goes up to 9, right? Yeah, okay. All right. So this is how I analyzed all this gobbledygook, and it's not that hard. You just go from the original major scale and then talk about what you've altered. So unlike classical music, as mentioned in the previous video, we do not analyze stuff in a natural minor scale. It's just easier universally to look at stuff, especially with this, because we can play around with these voicings, make them major and minor. It's easier to just look at it from the aspect of a major scale. Okay, so I called F the flat 7 because we took the sharp away, and a sharp that's flatted is a natural, so that's why that's natural there. We have A, which is the 9th, and then we have B, which is the third, and then of course we have D, which is the 5th tone of the G scale. You can do the same analytics with any chord. Originally in the previous video I did it with triads. Okay, so now let's say, since we're so fond of G, let's do, finally, G in the proper way, in the so-called B voicings. So, this is a 2-5-1, which means that we will be using A minor 7, to D7, to, again, I'm going to keep the example of G major 7 for the time being, but of course, don't worry, we will make it much more complicated, and coming up in the next video, we will do a standard minor 2-5-1, which is a little bit different, and who knows, maybe today or maybe some other time, we will be working on some alternate voicings as well. Keep in mind that this is all just a stepping stone. this is standard ways to play jazz chords, but you should branch out from it and even make up your own stuff. Okay, so now all I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy these numbers down here. So I got flat 7, 9, flat 3, 5, and then I got 3, 13, 7, 9, and then I got 7, 9, 3, 5. Okay, so key of A, B, C sharp. Okay, so there's our glorious key of A. So this, in the key of A, we have the 7th, which is G. We got to flat it, which means we're going to start on G natural. Okay, one and done. And then we got the 9th, which is B. If A is 8, then that's the 9th, right? So our 9th is B. And let's see what else we got here. Flat 3rd. So here's our 3rd. So now we have to flat it, meaning we're going to make that sharp A natural. Well, C natural, but you get the idea. And then we have the 5, which is E. Yeah. So we just pull in just like that. Yeah. Okay, now, again, as I did before, let's go back up here and just take a look at these voicings. So I have a 3rd, a 2nd, and then a 3rd. Let's see if I have the same intervals. I got a 3rd, a 2nd, and a 3rd. Okay, so that looks correct. On to the next one. So now we have D7. This would be, yes, in the key of G. I don't think I mentioned this in the first one. But jazz musicians, we don't really like key signatures. So we normally just toss in flats and sharps as we go. Mostly because this 2-5-1 stuff modulates sometimes. And you get out of a key and into another. It's a long explanation, but I'm just going to write in the actual sharps and flats and all that stuff. So here we start with D. We have the 3rd, which is F sharp. The 13th is B. The flat 7 is C natural. And the 9 is E. All right, so now let's take a look at my motion. So here's the original. We got a half step. The 9 goes to the 13, so that remains. The B remains 3 to 7, and then 5 to 9. So what changed there? So all it is just this one bottom note here. So let's see if that's the case down here. Yep, B, C, E, B, C, E, one bottom note changed. Bada bang! All right, cool. So now, G major. So here's our G major scale, conveniently. The 13th, just side note, the 13th is the 6th, kids. We call it the 13th here because we're denoting that it's a higher voicing. If we say it's the 6th, I mean, technically it would be correct, but calling it the 6th also implies that there is no flat 7 in this. Anyway, okay, and there is a flat 7. So, yeah, so G would be, we start with the 7th. What we call the natural 7th, or the regular 7th, in G is F sharp, so we're going to start with F sharp. F sharp, baby, F sharp. 2 is 9, same thing. That's supposed to say 5. I believe, right? Yes. So 2 is 9, same thing. The 3rd, and then the 5th. Now, let's see what moved here. So that note moved down. Okay, so basically these outer notes move down, and this high note moves down, but that note stays the same. So here, bottom note stays the same. These notes move down. High note moves down. So I know that this is correct. So here's a demo of what these sound like. I'm going to be playing their bass notes. Here's the first one. here is the second one. Okay, so now we're going to do a little bit of practical application with these voicings. I mentioned in the previous video that I'm currently writing a jazz book about basically how to play these voicings geared towards the high school college crowd. This stuff isn't really rocket science. The theory seems like rocket science, but once you put the theory into practice, it makes a lot more sense. So what we're going to quickly do is I'm going to do a pivot chord progression. And we're going to see how this stuff will work. Now, I'm only writing this in treble clef because we're just going to assume that these are not slash chords, meaning whatever voicing I put for D minor 7 is going to have D played along with it in the bass. So that's just kind of a given. So we're only talking right hand voicings, essentially. Eventually, too, you can work your right hand voicings in with your melody, but that's definitely a story for another time. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to combine, I've never done this before, but this is all theoretical. I'm going to combine my two different types of voicing. So this will be my A voicing, and then I got to figure out how to get to F. So here, well, heck, let's just analyze it a few different ways, plus that way I'll be able to write it again. So let's analyze it just in in the key of C. Okay, so in the key of C, D is 2, G is fumph, C is 1. This is C again. G is the minor 5. That's the 1 again. And then that's the 4. Now this doesn't really fit our 2-5-1 paradigm very nicely. So what we do in jazz, because this happens often, there are usually pivots to different keys, we are going to label this pivot in its own key. So really the better way to label this would be first in the key of C. So that's 2, 5, 1. Then in the key of F, 5, 2, 5, 1. Okay? I don't know what this is really going to sound like in the end. Again, this is an academic example. But because we basically split this now, we can easily say, oh, okay, I just need to use my A voicings here, and then I just need to use those B voicings here when the G minor starts. Simple. So this is what that would look like. So here we're going to start with D minor 7. My jazz voicings, and we'll go over them a little bit. So there's essentially a pivot point where I could have used basically two voicings for C7. I opted for this one since this is all theoretical and I can't actually hear what these sound like. I just went for this because all we're doing is flatting that B. And then we go to a different chord anyway, and this will give it a different sound using that 13 in there rather than just using the 5th, you know. So here I did my A voicings. And then here I did my B voicings. And this is what that sounds like. We're going to do another practical application we like to call chromatization. I don't even know how to spell this. That's supposed to say chromaticism. I probably spelled it wrong. They pay me to play music, not to spell. Okay, so chromaticism just means going down in half steps. All right. So there are songs that will do this, most notably Night and Day. We're going to be taking a look at the bridge to Night and Day. Now, I personally do not play this as a diminished. I just play it as a straight up minor because you can walk through this easier. And that's just a piano player thing. We, color outside the lines a little bit. So I'm just going to quickly duplicate this chord progression. I'm going to make those all minor because this is the way I personally play it. F sharp minor to E. So I like to play this, let's see, what do I play then? And I guess an A voicing. So just to start myself out, and you can do this with the B voicings too, or even just make up your own, because we're going to use chromatics and just take the same voicing and just go down in half steps. Again, this is the bridge to Night and Day. So I didn't give myself enough room there. So I play A. Okay. So this in the key of F sharp is 3, 5, 7, 9. So now all I have to do is do 3, 5, 7, 9 in E, which is this, 5. I'm sorry, I should be saying flat third, 7th, flat 9, flat third, regular 5th, flat 7th to the 9th. Okay, and then I got E flat. And now basically all you're doing is just lowering this stuff down a half step. And then that would be D flat, right? And then we got D minor, G, and then to C. Now, notice I didn't actually put sevens and stuff here. This is generally what I would play for this tune. I personally play this. I don't believe it's a standard way, but it just made my life easier when I was in college. So let's just quickly take a look at what's going on here. So again, all this is doing is I'm doing the same 3, 5, 7, 9 for F sharp minor, for E minor, for E flat minor, for D, and then here I'm just using my A voicings, right? This is a 2, 5, 1 in C, okay? So the other thing that's going on here that many of you don't know is a tritone substitution. Now, anytime you have chromatics, there are tritone substitutions. So let's see. E's tritone substitution is B flat. Now, in the key of E flat minor, B flat is the 5. So these both, even though this is not the 5 of E flat minor, these both serve the same function. Okay? And then here, E flat is a tritone sub for A. And A is the 5 of D. I should mention that tritone is a flat 5. Now here the tritones stop because this is just a straight up 2, 5, 1 in C. So you could do this, and this is a normal thing that jazz pianists will do. Instead of playing D minor, G, C, we'll use a tritone sub, or even add even more tritones to it, or even just throw in more pivot chords because we have ADD. But a simple example to this would be, let's substitute the G. So G, here's the key of G again. I've written it so many times, hopefully you guys can remember it by now. F sharp, G, right? Okay, so here's the fifth, which is D, and then if we flat it, that means it's D flat. So a tritone away from G is D flat. So that means if we substitute G with D flat, that's a tritone substitution. So here is just your kosher 2-5-1. And then here is your tritone sub, where we're just subbing for the 5. If you have, taking this further, let's say you have 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. You can turn this all chromatic. So here's what this sounds like just in jazz voicings as is. Now what I'm going to do is, just so I don't lose, I guess, my sense of do, I don't know how else to call it, so I can still imply a root, I suppose. I'm going to still start on E minor, but I'm going to do the substitutions, the tritone subs for that, and then the tritone sub for that. So we already know that the tritone sub for G is D flat, right? So then we're just going to put in C, we're going to do D minor, and again, you'll notice this is chromatic. So that means that if I get the tritone right here, it should be chromatic. So A's fifth is E, so that means that this is going to be some form of E flat. So here is this. I may make the E flat minor. I have a feeling I'll do that. And then the D will remain major. The D flat, I'm sorry, will remain major. So here's what that sounds like. Okay, so yeah, those are our B voicings and just a little bit about chromaticism and tritone substitutions. If you're lost, please go back to the other video. You shouldn't be here. Go back to go. Do not collect $200. Take it easy, friends, and stay tuned for our next jazz adventure.